Hey Angela, how's it going? Hope you're doing okay. Today I figured for our very first lesson we can start with the basics, starting with operant and classical conditioning, the 4 quadrants of learning, and the different types of trainers there are. There may be a few terms in there that are a little difficult to understand, but I'll give you a good example of each of them so you know what I'm talking about. So without further ado, get a notepad and a pen or just chill and relax and let's get started. First things first, how do animals learn? Basically through 2 types of conditioning, operant and classical conditioning. What is classical conditioning? Well, basically you pair a primary stimulus with a neutral stimulus to make that a new meaning. A primary stimulus is anything that you have an unconditioned response towards, meaning food, sex, water, life, protecting yourself, whatever. We have a little doggy here who likes the food. The food is the unconditioned primary stimulus. He likes food, he's going to have a good response towards it. The neutral stimulus is the whistle. The dog will care less about it. Doesn't have much of a response because the whistle has never meant anything to them before. They see a bowl of food, they know what that means. Food time. During the process of classical conditioning, you pair the two to give it a new response. So you whistle every time the dog sees the food, and it gives it a new meaning. The dog now hears the whistle and associates it with something good. In this case, food. This is classical conditioning, giving something that once didn't have much of a meaning, a new association. Another example of this would be loading the clicker. I use classical conditioning to get the dog to make a new association of the clicker. Click, treat, click, treat, click, treat. Over and over, a couple dozen times until the dog hears the click and associates it with something good. In this case, they know a treat is coming. That's a great example of classical conditioning. Next, we're going to go over operant conditioning. Specific consequences are associated with involuntary behavior. This includes reinforcing or punishing a behavior. Reinforcement is to increase the behavior, hence here, the little rat touches the lever, food comes out. That increases this behavior. The rat will do it more often to get more food. Or you would punish the behavior, hence here, the little rat touches the lever, gets electrocuted or zapped, and decreases the behavior. Decreases the likelihood that it will come back again. Consequences in operant conditioning can be both good and bad, as a way to increase or decrease a behavior. Both classical and operant conditioning are used when training an animal. Which leads us to the 4 quadrants of learning. First here, we have the reinforcement. Positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive, meaning you add something positive to the situation to increase the likelihood of behavior. For this case, you're teaching a dog to sit. So you use something pleasant for the dog, such as cookies or treats, to increase a sit. The dog sits, they get a treat. Reinforcing that behavior will happen again in the future. For negative reinforcement, you take away something the dog finds negative as a way to increase that behavior. You're using negative reinforcement to teach a dog to sit. So you pull up on a prong collar, which applies pressure around the dog's throat. When the dog sits, you remove that prong collar pressure. The dog will learn to sit quicker next time to avoid that pressure. That's negative reinforcement versus positive reinforcement. Next we have punishment. Remember, punishment is meant to decrease a behavior. The plus in this case is to add something negative as a punishment. The minus in this case is to take something away as a punishment. For positive punishment, you might add a prong collar correction. Say a dog jumps on you instead of sitting. You might give them a pop with the collar or a quick sudden jerk as a punishment for jumping. This will decrease the future behavior the dog will jump. Negative punishment might not be as negative as you might think. In this case, remember, we're taking something the dog likes away instead of adding something they don't like. You're trying to teach a dog to sit and not jump. So if the dog doesn't sit and instead jumps on you, you take those cookies away, punishing the dog because the dog doesn't get the reward. As soon as they sit, bam, give them their treat, positive reinforcement. Now I generally use positive reinforcement and negative punishment, meaning I use treats to lure the dog and reward the dog for great behavior to increase it, and I'll take those rewards away in order to decrease any unwanted behavior. Occasionally, I will use negative reinforcement. I only use this when teaching a dog to walk. I never use prong collars, choke chains, any special corrections. I don't jerk, yank and crank. I simply apply pressure and release. We'll go over this more in detail in a later video. But for now, when I'm teaching a dog to walk, they pull, I stop that forward motion, apply steady, even pressure, usually with just my fingertips, just enough to get that dog to take a step back and move into that pressure. As soon as they do, I release the pressure, bam, there we go. That is negative reinforcement. I apply something that makes the dog a little uncomfortable until they give me the proper response. If this doesn't work, I move to another quadrant. Positive reinforcement, negative punishment. I lure them using some treats and tasty things. or I might take them away from something they like, something they're pulling towards. Those are the basics of operant and classical conditioning. They both work side by side when training an animal or a sentient being. Dogs, humans, monkeys, apes, cats, goldfish, any creature that learns from a consequence, whether it's good or bad, as well as being able to be classically conditioned to a neutral stimulus. This leads us to the different types of trainers out there. You may be thinking to yourself, I didn't know there was more than one type of trainer. Or you may have known that there were multiple types. Everybody has their own certain name for their type of niche. For me, I call myself a balance trainer. Some people are positive reinforcement, some are positive reinforcement only, some are compulsion, some are motivational trainers. Whatever you call yourself, the methods are still the same. In my mind, there's 3 types of trainers: positive reinforcement, balance trainers, and compulsion trainers. I'll give you an example of how each trainer works and the types of tools they use. First up, we have positive reinforcement trainers. Most positive reinforcement trainers don't use a lot of corrections. They often use treats and clickers, a treat pouch. They endorse basket muzzles for the safety of the dog and their comfort. They like to use no pull harnesses and sometimes martingales or no slip collars. Occasionally they might use a slip leash or regular leash just for the dog's regular walking. And they often endorse head halters. Now, I'm totally fine with these guys. I'm a-okay with positive reinforcement. I love it. I use it a lot. I don't call myself a positive reinforcement trainer because I do use some other types of punishment. Occasionally, I do use negative reinforcement and negative punishment. That's not to say these guys don't use any kind of punishment. Generally, with positive reinforcement, they take that food away, they take that treat away, they take the reward away, meaning negative punishment. Next up, we have balance trainers. Nowadays, I have an issue with the word balance because most balance trainers are really just compulsion trainers. And here's why. This is the toolbox of what a basic balance trainer would look like. They have prong collars, shock collars, e-collars, choke chains, star mark collars, slip leads, martingales, often with the chain so they can give that correction, use the chain as a sound. They have slip leads and slip collars, dominant dog collars, to be specific. They may use no pull harnesses, correction spray, pet corrector, just compressed air. Bitter yuck or bitter apple spray is a chewing deterrent. They might use head halters, Baskerville muzzles, basket muzzles, treats, clickers, and a treat pouch. There's a whole lot going on here. A few more things than the positive reinforcement trainer. Now to me, I think this is a great setup. They have lots of things for reinforcement. They have some things for negative punishment, maybe negative reinforcement. To me, I think this is a great example of being balanced all across the spectrum of the 4 quadrants of learning. However, for me, being a balanced trainer, I do not use, nor endorse, nor rely on prong collars, shock collars, choke chains, star collars, slip leads, or the martingales where you need to give your dog a correction. What I do use are anything down here. Very similar to a positive reinforcement, but I do give certain corrections. Compressed air, maybe a little bit of bitter yuck, chewing deterrent, and that's about it. That's as much as I do. But a lot of balance trainers really kind of rely on this top row. Now, it's fine. Not saying all of them, just in my experience, a lot of so-called balance trainers don't seem very balanced. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Balance should be all across the spectrum. Use anything and everything, except for these. To me, that's never necessary. But you do use a lot more tools than what they do actually use, which I'll show you in a moment. This is what compulsion training looks like. In my eyes, I think a lot of balance trainers are actually just compulsion trainers. This is why. They often rely on prong collars, shock collars, choke chains, star collars, star mark collars, slip leads, and dominant dog collars, which are just a choke chain made out of leather, muzzles, correction spray, bitter yuck, and sometimes head halters. The difference between these guys and the balance trainers is that these guys rarely, if at all, use treats or positive reinforcement. Mainly they use negative reinforcement and positive punishment. To each their own, but to me, I don't think it benefits the dog as much, and it's much harder for any owner to learn how to do it correctly because it requires proper timing. This method to me is never necessary. A lot of balance trainers I've met and have seen only use these types of tools and negative reinforcement. A true balance trainer in my eye uses treats and positive reinforcement as much as they might with negative reinforcement and punishment. Call me a softie, call me a tree hugger, that's just how I see it. If you really want the honest truth, I could call myself a beneficial dog trainer. I work to benefit the dog. Of course I'm out to help the people, but I'm not going to do it if the dog ends up paying for it. Well, that will be a good end to this first lesson. Right here we have Adonis, who wanted to come and say hello. He's been with me for 7 years, and this guy, has taught me everything I know about how dogs really work. And that punishments and corrections don't work with him. You get further with honey than you do with vinegar. Keep that in mind. And remember, try to ask yourself, is what I'm doing really benefiting the dog or just the humans involved? Well, I hope that wasn't too hard to understand. I hope I clarified everything. I hope I wasn't too confusing for you. If you have questions, of course, you can let me know. And that will be a good first lesson to work on. Feel free to do extra research on your own about this type of subject. This is just my opinion and my experience and my education, what education has taught me. So I hope this helps for now, and I will be in touch to send you another video pretty soon. Okay. Thanks again, Angela. Have a good one. All right. Oh, you fell. Good boy.